This is the Blaze Radio on demand.
In the next 19 seconds, you could sell your home. Okay, it's not going to sell your home, but you're going to take a big step toward getting it sold. Go to realestateagentsitrust.com and find an agent selected by my team, a professional who shares your values and speaks the truth. Sell your home fast and for the most money. Get moving at realestateagentsitrust.com.
Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
Team Buck, welcome to the Freedom Hut. Thank you for being here. We'll be getting into some Freestyle Friday in a few minutes. Phone lines, of course, are already open. If you care to call in, 888-900-3393. In a couple of days, it will be the 15th anniversary of 9/11, September 11th, 2001. I'm sure you all have your memories of what that day was like. Some of you may have even been directly affected in one way or another. I thought we could reflect on it a little bit because I won't be on air with you on Sunday, and by the time Monday gets rolling around, I'm sure the media will have already completely switched gears to something else. I do think that there's a growing trend to make this seem like a natural disaster, to focus on the sort of healing phase of this without the outrage aspect of it as well. And look, of course, the healing is very important, especially for the families of those who were lost on that day. But I don't think we should allow ourselves to skip over what September 11th was really about. And I think that sense is being lost already. I'm seeing articles across the country about how they're trying to teach this in schools and how they're trying to find ways to make sure that students know about 9/11. And they do some background reading on it and maybe even engage in some kinds of exercises. I was reading somewhere that they were in a school, they were pulling somebody out of rubble to sort of reenact part of it, and they're doing all these sorts of things. I went for the first time maybe a little more than a month ago, to the 9/11 memorial. It is very serene. It is very picturesque. It's aesthetically very appealing. They did a good job with it. I did feel a bit like this gives you no sense. And this is a description, or this is a critique, or maybe just a comment you could make about lots of different memorials, in a sense. But you didn't really get any feeling of what happened on that day. You just see that there are the names there. And look, to me, it didn't really feel like it was memorializing the site of an attack. It was sort of, I don't know, it was more sterilized of that than I perhaps would have liked to see at a memorial of that kind. But I don't know. I'm not somebody who designs war memorials or memorials of attacks like this. I haven't been to the Pearl Harbor Museum or Memorial, for example. I did not get a chance to go into the 9/11 Museum, so perhaps I would have had a different feeling if I was able to go inside. Just the line was way too long, and I didn't have the time that day. So I think about that day and what it did in my own life. I'm sure for many of you, especially many of you listening to this show, I'm sure had a similar course change, at least in their thinking about the world, if not, in fact, in the way that their life played out. You think back to the morning, and I remember it actually pretty well, and it was very strange for me too, because within weeks of this, I remember thinking to myself, there was the Greatest Generation, and there was Vietnam, and there have been these other eras when the U.S. was and the Cold War engaged in some sort of major conflict, perhaps even an existential conflict. And it felt like at that time, so I would have been, 19 or 20 on September 11th, 2001. I would have been, I guess, soon to be 20. I think that's right. Yeah. I think back to that period. I think back to that day. I was walking to, it was actually Shakespeare class, which I think is, in a sense, very fitting. I was walking to a class. It was really the only classic English literature course I took in college. The rest of it I did in high school. I did a lot of political science in college. I didn't really do much in the way of English lit in college, but I took a Shakespeare course because I feel like you're at a liberal arts school. You should take Shakespeare at some point. And for me, at least, the sense that it was an attack on Western civilization, it was, and somehow, I don't know, I felt like there was some resonance, and I was walking to a class where I would be studying one of the greatest, really, certainly the greatest playwright in the English language. And let's be serious, I mean, the greatest playwright in history. We can start to say these sorts of things. I'm sure somebody would point out an obscure playwright of 10th century Arabia or something and say just as good, but I try to be serious in my discussions about these things, not just please people and play games of political correctness. So I was walking to class, and I remember sitting down, and the professor, in a sort of strangely ominous tone, said, "I would like to excuse all of you from class. And by the way, I had been in, I think this would have been I would have been in the second week of my Arabic class that I just started when this happened as well. I took Arabic language sophomore year. And I was sitting there, and the professor says, a plane has flown into one of the World Trade Center buildings. We don't know how many people have been injured, but I'd like to excuse you all from class, and we're going to monitor it closely. Something along those lines. I don't remember his exact words. But we all got up, and I remember thinking, as so many others did, okay, we're going to go and turn on. I happened to be not many of my friends had a TV in their room. A lot of people had them in sort of common areas. I had a TV in my room, and I remember thinking that we're going to flip on the TV, and the TV will show a bit of smoke, and we'll all sit around and think about how unfortunate it is for the family of this pilot in this prop plane that was blown off course or had an engine malfunction, and maybe there was some poor soul sitting at a desk in one of the buildings, or a couple of people who were also killed by this. Very sad, but certainly did not think that when all was said and done, over the course of that day, 2,996 people would have lost their lives. I certainly didn't think that I would sit down on my couch with several of my closest friends in college joining me, and we would see the sort of gaping hole in the building. And at that point, it was clear that this was something different. And watching in real time, if I recall, and this is a long time ago, but this is my recollection of it, as the second plane hit, which I remember put a tremendous moment of panic in the room. Everyone was yelling, "Oh my God, oh my God." And standing there, and I remember I said out loud, "We're going to war." I remember that very clearly. I didn't know against whom or what that even meant, but it was clear that this was something else. This was different. My various friends of mine on campus, of course, were all walking around kind of in a daze. This is up in central Massachusetts. It was, as it was here in New York City, a beautiful day in Massachusetts. The fall, sort of early mid-September in New York, as in much of New England, I think is probably the most beautiful and spectacular part of the year. And people were wandering around, and they were not really able to process much of this. I remember going with friends. Finally, we hadn't eaten, and by the time lunchtime came around, we walked into town and grabbed some sandwiches or something and went walking around the town green. And I remember thinking, are we going to get Are we going to get drafted? Is this going to be like that? How many more planes are there? Received a call from, I think it was the president of the college, asking if I knew, if we had determined the whereabouts of my uncle, my mother's sister's husband, who worked for Aon Corporation, who did not lose his life that day, but certainly many of his colleagues. I think Aon, after Cantor Fitzgerald, was the corporation that had the second highest number of deaths in the World Trade Center attack. And then we gathered, and this was all sort of, it feels a bit surreal. I remember all of it, but I think back to it. And, of course, my entire family at the time was in New York City. I think my older brother might have still been in Philadelphia, but the rest of my family was here in the city. And instant messenger was working. I remember that. Cell phones were not for a while. They were just jammed, people trying to reach people. But instant messenger was working. And so I was able to communicate with people that way. I also remember watching as the towers collapsed, by the way, which was when we were, and I thought about maybe playing a montage. There'll be lots of montages over the weekend showing this, and I didn't think that would add really that much to our discussion now. I just wanted to share with you my recollections of that day and what it meant for me in terms of the different path that my life has taken as a result of that day. Before then, I'll be honest with you, I had always thought that I'd work a job where I would try to be good at the job and make money, maybe Wall Street, I don't know, maybe become a lawyer, something where I could have a comfortable life and, find the right woman and have a nice family. I did not think at any point in time that I would be bouncing around in one of the sketchier, more dangerous parts of the African continent on a mission for the government. I did not think that I would be thereafter deployed in Iraq and after that in Afghanistan. None of this, of course, at the time really crossed my mind, although I did think that day that now this is our fight. Now this is my generation's time to rise up and be counted. As I've said to you before, the first job I applied for was the CIA. I applied at the beginning of my senior year of college. I still remember in a moment that was probably not, I didn't know any better, but telling a couple of my friends, I applied to the CIA. Probably shouldn't have done that. I ended up going overt, and as many of you know, or probably know, there are plenty of CIA employees who their employment is open. I mean, they don't like you to sort of put it on your Facebook profile and publicize it, but there are people who, you know who the director of the CIA is, and there are people whose names you're allowed to know who are CIA affiliated. And I was never somebody who was undercover. So anyway, that was all a very dramatic change in my life. I know for many of you it meant that you signed up for the military, signed up to serve your country in some capacity, in some cases made tremendous sacrifices, put yourself in very real danger, and I'm sure many of you listening also lost friends, lost colleagues, and lost brothers and sisters in arms. So it transformed in many ways our perceptions of the world. I'm a little taken aback by the sense I have here in New York City that so many people have moved on from it, and it's now sort of ceremonial, and we think of it with the same sort of distance that we think of a Pearl Harbor, for example. In many cases, I don't. I know you don't, but that's the perception that I have here in this city. It's a historical event. We've moved on past it. Meanwhile, the ideology that led people to run planes, to drive planes into buildings, to kill almost 3,000 people, to kill more people in one day than we have lost in the entirety of the 14 years we've been in Afghanistan. We've U.S. coalition, or U.S. rather, military fatalities in Afghanistan are 2,000, close to 2,400 at this point. And you have almost 3,000 people killed in one day, just to give you a sense of the scale on 9/11. So we seem to be very quickly moving away from this, and I think, unfortunately, it's a lesson, a very painful lesson from our recent history that we would do well to remember. We used to hear very often, never forget about 9/11. People would say, we will never forget. They would have FDNY or NYPD T-shirts on, 9/11 Memorial. It was much more a part of the culture here in New York City, our historical culture, and nationally than I think it continues to be now. I think some of this is just, for some people, they want to create a psychological distance from it. But I also think there's something a little more pernicious going on. And I think that there are many in media, in government, many people in America, unfortunately, who would like to sort of rewrite what that day was all about and who have a very different view of it than the rest of us. And I want to get into some of that when we come back here after a break. First, though, our sponsor this half hour is silencershop.com. I can't tell you enough, silencer is a great thing, whether you're out hunting, whether you're just target shooting, whatever it is you're doing with your firearm out there on the range, indoor, outdoor, you name it. Having a silencer is a fantastic accessory. It's a great thing to have when you're actually exercising your Second Amendment rights. Silencershop.com offers the best experience, period, for the whole process, both picking out your silencer. They have the widest selection, buying it because they're going to make sure that you get through the paperwork, because there is some paperwork. There's some hurdles you have to go through to get it, but it's not that tough. They'll make it easy as possible for you at silencershop.com. They've also got the best prices, and your local dealer sets the price. So it's really like you're buying local, even though you're buying through silencershop.com. So you've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain here. Check it out. Silencershop.com. Again, that is silencershop.com. Help make the world a quieter place, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
Hey team, it's Buck. Have you tried a Casper mattress yet? They are incredible. They're obsessively engineered, and they come at a shockingly fair price for a mattress that brings together technology and comfort to also be a great value. Is just too much for any of you to pass up. It combines springy latex and supportive memory foams to create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right sink and the perfect bounce. Time magazine named it one of the best inventions of 2015. It is an award-winning mattress that absolutely will not disappoint. Try Casper for 100 nights risk-free in your own home. If you don't love it, they'll pick it up and refund you everything. Free shipping and returns to the U.S. and Canada. And for listeners of this show, you can get a special $50 toward any mattress by going to Casper.com/Buck, Casper.com/Buck, and using Buck as the code. Terms and conditions apply.
Buck Sexton.
So, team, bringing you back to my remembrance of 9/11 on that day. And if any of you want to call in and talk about what you remember, I welcome it. Wherever you were, if there's something you want to share about what it felt like to you. One of the clearest days I really remember from college, honestly, probably the clearest. I remember 9/11 much more clearly than my graduation. I'll be honest with you, I barely remember my graduation. Didn't really care at that point. So, yeah, it was quite a day. And I've told you before, it was the only time we had an all-school. They canceled sports, but not class, which we all thought was sort of strange. So we have to go to class and pretend to concentrate, but we can't then go onto the athletic field and practice or anything, which, I don't know, that was the administration's decision. Who cares? Small potatoes, but still, it's sort of weird. We all gathered that same day, I want to say around 4 p.m.-ish, in the gymnasium of the school. And there's only 1,600 students at Amherst, so it's a small school. And I remember being there, and I'm very proud that I had the frame of, I shouldn't say very proud. I mean, there's, again, this is my own little minor form of protest against stupidity on a day that should have been a completely unified. We should have been a completely unified country. But I told you, professors stood up in front of us, and I thought they would just want to speak to us. Remember, these are people who often discuss the need to heal and to be sensitive and to be tolerant. I thought this would be anything you need from any of us. We are a family. We are one people here. We are one American family. And to our foreign students, we extend, our warmest embrace as well. And, professors' offices, hours will be extended longer. Will be psychologists on campus for anybody who's having a hard time. And instead, we were treated to at least a couple of professors saying, this is what happens when you make people angry. And this was a very important moment in my life, not just because 9/11 led to me joining the CIA, which led to me getting into media, which led me to sitting in this chair speaking to all of you now across the country, but also because it was the day when I realized that there were people in this country, there were other Americans who did not share my love for this country, weren't patriots, and actually just wanted to watch the whole place burn because they thought that we deserved it. And they were on the left, they were progressives, and yeah, I'll say it, if they were going to choose a president, it was going to be a Democrat. We'll talk more about this in a few, team. Stay with me.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
This is the Buck Sexton Show.
So a bunch of professors stood up in front of us on 9/11 and shocked me. I stood up and left the auditorium. And I remember a friend of mine who was also a member of the College Republicans, no surprise. I believe he stood up and just sort of shook his head in front of everybody. He might have left with me. I definitely got up and left, though. I was very agitated. Didn't really feel like fighting with anyone at that point over this. It felt petty and stupid. Here we were in the middle of Massachusetts. We knew we were basically safe. And we had professors here who thought that this was time to give us a foreign policy lesson. The same sort of ideas that you'll see on CNN, quite honestly, and MSNBC and other channels after every terrorist attack. There are people who will come up and they think that they are sophisticated and erudite, and they think that they're clever because they'll find some way to explain how this is either our fault or the real threat is our response to it. Those are the two basic leftist, self-hating, self-defeating, and I would say ideologically treasonous points of view that you'll see advanced, and you see this happening all the time by people who, even in some cases, work for the government. Worked for, I should say, and work for, pardon me, both. Before I get too deep into that, I just also think, though, if I'm going to talk about the horrific loss of life that day, and I think it just bears, we should be very clear as we talk about it. We were attacked by 19 Muslims. 15 of the 19 were Saudi. They were jihadists. They had radicalized. They were a part of a globally dispersed Muslim terrorist cell, as you know, known as Al-Qaeda, which means the base. Al-Qaeda had openly declared war on us and had engaged in a number of major terrorist attacks before this, during the Clinton administration, by the way. I think it's very interesting how everything that goes wrong in the Middle East is blamed on Bush, but the war on terror that Bush had to fight is never put at Clinton's feet for his doing nothing. Well, he was doing some things, but not things that we would want a commander-in-chief doing during his 8 years in office. But I know that's sort of down into the nitty-gritty of the politics of it, and this should be above that. Of course it's not. As I say, there are people who... I was appalled. I think some of you saw the segment. I was appalled when after the Nice attacks, I'm sitting on a CNN panel, and we have a group of so-called experts, a former FBI agent, a former CIA officer, and other than me, and a, quote, scholar, although they use that term very loosely, all going around and saying, well, yeah, this is because France doesn't integrate its Muslims well enough. So it's France's fault. So France should just expect that 80 people will be mowed down by a psychotic jihadist, mass murderer, as a little protest against against what? I mean, this notion that they're not integrated well enough. I mean, anybody who's living in France in any capacity is lucky. I mean, if we really want to break this down, I've been in places, I've seen what it's like to be where somebody's truly desperate, truly poor, truly disenfranchised, right? And I'm sure some of you have had similar experiences, but you see children walking around, as I've mentioned before, and one day perhaps I can give you the details of this or whatever, but I don't, just so I can make sure that I don't have to worry about, someone at Langley hearing the wrong thing and coming after me and causing problems. Which they'll do because I'm a Republican, by the way. I'm a conservative. And if you think that there isn't a double standard that exists all across the government for who gets the benefit of the doubt and who gets the doubt of the benefit, shall we say, I'm sorry to inform you are wrong. The prosecutors, the investigators, the DOJ, the background security investigators, the internal security people at the various intelligence agencies are part of the system. They're part of the machine, and the machine is left. It is leftist. It is statist. It is now collectivist and progressive in the way that it operates. And we'll get into some of this, by the way, and some specifics with the news story in just a little bit. Others are recognizing this as well. But I've already told my parents at some point they'll come after me. I don't know how serious it will be, and I don't know how much of a problem it will be, but at some point, if I get big enough. Right now, they can sort of ignore me. I mean, I can smack around their people on CNN when I'm actually allowed to speak or ask a real question. But if the team continues to grow and stay with me, if Team Buck continues to be what it has been and is a sort of self-perpetuating organism of truth and freedom and, I say, goodness, they will try to cause problems because the system is set up specifically. Look, go and ask any number of conservatives out there. You can probably Google this too, who haven't served in government. When you serve in government, they always have their tentacles on you, and they essentially at some point will just sort of pull the leash, and there will be issues. They'll say, you can't say this, you can't do that, you can't write this book, you can't, and they just make your life miserable when they decide to. And there's very little you can do about it other than just fight. Even for people who've never served in government, though, how many of them get audited just relentlessly by the IRS? I mean, just hounded by the IRS, and we're supposed to be. Meanwhile, at MSNBC, they've got anchors who just don't even pay their taxes. But, whatever. They'll get to it eventually. Maybe they didn't even file. But it's MSNBC. I mean, it's like an extension of the White House. Come on. These are Hillary and Obama's people. Let's leave them alone. So, anyway, that's sort of a digression, but that's why I speak in sort of vague ways. I can tell you a little bit about Iraq and a little bit about Afghanistan. I wish I could talk to you a lot more about what I did there. And maybe this is all sort of forcing me to get to a point where I can officially try to clear some of this, although the downside of that is once you try to officially get the word, and if they say no, well, then I know I definitely can't say it, right? At least you can pull the Hillary card. Well, I didn't know. I mean, of course, the Hillary card for me wouldn't work, but I didn't know that was and I'm talking about stuff that's really not actually classified, but they might decide that it is. I mean, the CIA and these other agencies sometimes go pick up a book that they've cleared of a former employee, and you'll be like, I know what the words are that are blacked out. This is the dumbest thing. It's akin to the stupidity of removing ISIS and Allah from Omar Mateen, the Orlando shooters transcript. That's how dumb the review process is and how unfair and arbitrary it is. And especially, by the way, for speaking truth about the government, and especially if you're on the right. You can talk to any number. There are any number of authors. I feel like I should bring them on and just show you what the differences are. They can tell you themselves between writing a book that is critical of Islam, that comes from a patriotic, pro-American point of view, but it's also critical of government, versus a sort of, boilerplate, this is the way that it was, and my home agency does great work, and everything's fine. Much easier to get the latter through. I was mentioning to you Africa and poverty just because I've seen dire poverty and a lot of it and doesn't result in suicide bombings. And so, as we know, many of the terrorists that attack in Europe as well as around the world, as well as in Iraq, Afghanistan, you name the country where there are jihadist mass murders that are occurring on a regular basis. And they aren't necessarily poor. In many cases, they're educated. And in some cases, they're even upper middle class, or in the case of bin Laden, quite wealthy. This is not about economics. It's about belief. You can try to tie other things into it. You can say there's exacerbating factors, but this is about belief, and it is about a belief system that unfortunately lends itself far too easily, this being Islam, to, in our modern context, for a lot of reasons, and there are complexities here, but to radicalization. If you are a believing Muslim who thinks that he or she has a duty to protect fellow Muslims, and you live in a country where you see satellite TV and there's a constant drumbeat of American and Western bombs dropping on these cities for no good reason, they're doing the bidding of the Jews in Israel. This is the propaganda that's out there. People who are true believers, many of them, obviously a small percentage of a very large number is still a large number, is part of the problem here. But for the purposes of today and talking about 9/11, that we have so many in America who don't seem willing to even speak these obvious truths and always want to find some way to just lay down and take it. You know, it's our fault, or we're the problem, meaning that we're going to be the problem. You know, there's going to be mosques burned down all over this country because of the latest terrorist attack. You'll notice that doesn't happen. You'll notice that the American people don't respond to wanton violence and savagery with the same. It's because we're better than they are. We should be able to say that and not feel weird about it. We are. We are better than these people that espouse jihad. We are better human beings. We're more moral. We're more decent. We're more connected to reality. We're just better. Not different, not, you know, they have their way, we have ours, not, their historical truths are equal, or we should pay more attention to the way they view these things. No, they have a deep rot in their brains, in their hearts, if you want to be a little less scientific about it, and that's important for all of us to understand. There is nothing that could be done to an otherwise moral and decent person that would convince him or her to walk into a crowd of people that he's never met before, that have done nothing wrong to him or her, and intentionally blow as many of them up as possible with a suicide vest. There's no level of oppression that could do. It doesn't. You would have to think that you have a divine warrant, a divine right to murder innocent people, because that is actually moral. That's a moral imperative, because they're non-believers. They are less than. They're subhuman. You'd have to believe they're subhuman. You can only believe that if your ideology dictates that because they don't worship the same God, they don't subscribe to your religion, to your belief system, that they are subhuman. Otherwise, you couldn't do it. And people say, but what about the fellow Muslims they kill? Yeah, well, within the jihadist framework, it's called takfir, they're not even real Muslims anymore. So this is where we really get into the discussion of, we've got Muslim allies. The question then turns into, most of the Muslim world, in fact, is on our side, but who's the real Muslim? The one who is the literalist, who looks at the essentially constant state of warfare between Islam and other religions, which is historically the case, or is it the westernized, kind, law-abiding, and in some cases, alcohol drinking, suit wearing, or miniskirt clad Muslim American who agrees with you and me on basically everything? Who's more Muslim? I don't know. I don't have an answer to the question. It's actually a question that people should take much more seriously than they do, or at least shouldn't brush it aside as easily as they do. This is something that other scholars of religion who are honest say is not as clear a case as we would like to believe. But see, these are the things that I think about on 9/11. I worry that for a lot of the country now, it's just become another excuse for a candlelight vigil. And I do say that with a kind of disdain, because it's much more than just that. This was an attack on America. This was an attack on Western civilization. It was based in an ideology with which we are still at war. There are many people who celebrate the attack against us. They are out there. They would like to have another attack just like it. They would do it tomorrow if they could. And we are still at war with them. That's what I think about on 9/11. It's not about a play where we help somebody get out of rubble. I mean, this is some of the stuff I'm seeing in these schools. I worry and I wonder. Going to a break. We'll be right back.
The Buck Sexton Show.
Discover more at theblaze.com/radio.
The Blaze Radio Network.
Dispensing the truth. This is Buck Sexton
On the Blaze Radio Network.
Let's take a call from Bill in Germany. What's up, Bill?
Hey, Buck, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, no issues. Hey, I was calling in to talk about the 9/11 experience. I've been in the military now since 2000, and when 9/11 happened, I was actually on my way to the unit. We were going to do a nighttime deployment because the helicopters we fly only fly at night and can only do certain things in certain countries at night. And we were actually put on hold and told we might be remissioned to Afghanistan. So for about 48 hours, the families, the guys, and this exercise that we had planned for a year, which was about $12.5 million, was put on hold. We ended up conducting the exercise and ended up watching the invasion, so to speak, from our deployed headquarters. And I'll tell you, as a military member at the time, I've never felt since then, since this happened, and I've been to Afghanistan, I've never felt more eager and more disappointed in not being able to go and be a part of the fight that was the initial the surge. That's just the way I felt on 9/11.
Oh, Bill, I appreciate you sharing that with all of us, and also appreciate your service, and thank you very much for calling in from Germany. Good to talk to you, my man. All right, 888-900-3393. I've got a whole lot more to talk about here, team, so don't go anywhere. We will be back in just a few minutes. Phone lines are open. We're going to get into it. Well, we'll transition into a lighter tone in the second hour today. A little more freestyle coming up in just a few minutes.
The Buck Sexton Show.
only on the Blaze Radio Network. Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
Team Buck, welcome back to the Freedom Hut. Thank you very much for joining. Great to have you in hour two here. Just a quick side note. Hat tip, whoever on the team sent this to me on Twitter. Where did it go a second ago? I think it was, Phil P. Hat tip for the Twitter heads up on this. I went to my alma mater's website, which I haven't been to in a very, very long time. And you've got to see it, guys. If somebody was like, Buck, what does the Amherst College website look like right now? I'd be like, I don't know, a bunch of diverse kids all holding hands and smiling while thinking about how they're going to solve the world's problems. And that is 100% what the website is. They're actually doing a kumbaya hand-holding circle, and they have various, all the sort of different ethnicities that you would think represented, and everyone's and they're out on the grass, and everyone's smiling. They're like, "Yay, college!" Meanwhile, the reality for a lot of them when they show up is going to be like, "Hey, man, did you make it home, or do I need to carry you?" "I don't know, dude. I had like 12 Natty Lights. Who drinks Natty Light except for college students? Is there like a requirement that you have to be, also known as Natural Light, by the way? People call it Natty Light for as a shorthand. Natural Light. This is a beer that you can buy 30 packs of, which I have not seen since college, and it was a very prominent thing when I was in college. That and the punch that they would make in like trash cans, which the fact that we drank out of trash cans at a school where everyone's paying $50,000 a year to go there says a lot. I think that tells you a lot of what you need to know. Any drinking out of trash cans when you went to school, Ty? Yes, yeah, that's what I feel. It's more common than like normal adults who didn't do this realize. But it happens. It definitely happens. I want to talk a little bit about I was mentioning before the bureaucracy and how I think the bureaucracy people are realizing more and more that the bureaucracy has turned. Right. If we're talking Walking Dead here, the bureaucracy is like and like sort of standing up, and it's like mouth is all crazy and the teeth are out, and it's going to try to bite and eat people. The bureaucracy has turned, or if it were a vampire, it has its fangs now. You get where I'm going with this. It's now an organ of the Democratic Party. Overwhelmingly. It doesn't mean there aren't awesome patriots who work for the various federal agencies. Of course there are. Many of them. But if you're looking at who runs these places and what the prevailing internal ethos is, as I've said to you, the bureaucracy is surprising in how nimble and effective and efficient it is when it comes to protecting itself. That's when all of a sudden it's sort of like if you look at some of the O linemen. I'm having a lot of fun with analogies here. If you look at like an O lineman in the NFL sitting down eating a sandwich, you'd be like, I could outrun that guy. And then if you actually had to run away from one on a football field, you'd be like, oh my gosh, they're so fast. It's terrifying. Bureaucracies are like that when they're defending themselves. They otherwise seem kind of lethargic and large and unable to move effectively or quickly. But when it comes to not even just self-preservation is not really the right term. Self-protection, right? Making sure their budgets and their size and their mission and all those sorts of things. They're very, very good at that. And so they have this collectivist mindset. Also, Democrats, as you know, are the party of government. They're much more fond of government as a solution to problems, and therefore you're just going to have, naturally, there will be more people on the Democratic side of the ledger who or who choose to work in government. This is also the case with the State Department. If you're going to study international relations, you're going to go through an indoctrination program at a lot of these schools that is going to tell you about American imperialism and colonialism, and these are bad things. And you're going to have a lot of foreign students in your classes who are so quick to lecture you on all the bad foreign policy decisions America makes and tell you about how horrible everything is. And you're never allowed to say anything about when it comes to their countries. I've had this experience, especially when I've studied abroad with a bunch of foreigners. Whenever you bring up their countries, it's always either America's fault still, and you're like, really? Like, I mean, all the problems in Lebanon are our fault, guys? Really? I don't know about that. Or because you haven't lived there, you're not allowed to talk about it. That's the other one. It's like, really? I'm pretty sure North Korea is a bad place, even though can't say I've spent a lot of time there. That's true. So that's what you can say. But it's gotten worse in recent years, and you have the IRS targeting of the Tea Party, for which there's been really no accountability and nothing has changed. I know right now the House is thinking about impeaching Koskinen, who's the IRS chief. But that's, what's that? Is that really going to do anything? No. It means nothing, honestly. If we think this is accountability, we're fooling ourselves. And then you have the actions of the FBI recently. Look, we had Andy McCarthy on yesterday, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for Andy, both in terms of his integrity as well as his intellect. And he's a really good guy and has very deep experience in these matters. And we've had some back and forths, both sort of on and off air, about some of the very well-known prosecutorial figures out there on the scene. For example, I think Fitzgerald, who was involved in both the Scooter Libby prosecution as well as the I think he also did Blagojevich, is a completely politicized hack looking for headlines and to settle political scores. And, Andy worked with him and says that he's has only good things to say about him. I can say that, even though we've only talked about this really off air. I don't think Andy would mind me saying that he only has good things to say about him. And Andy said yesterday on air that he only has good things to say about Comey. But you look at what's happened recently, and this is just completely this is where I kind of wish I could throw some profanity into the show, but I won't. But just insert your choice profanity here. I mean, this is a total bad word. It's appalling what's happened here. I mean, that you've got Comey saying that they released this stuff right before the Labor Day holiday because they don't want it to seem politicized. And if they didn't release it on the Friday before Labor Day, then it would. It's like, no, you have that backwards. But that's how polluted and convoluted your thinking has become, that you don't understand that, no, it's the much better to do it the other way, where it doesn't look like you're covering for the Clintons, than to fall into this narrative, which you're hearing from people now of, oh, the Clintons, it's so hard what they have to deal with. Oh, it's terrible. I mean, Matt Lauer is getting heat for asking Hillary very obvious questions that he has to ask her about the email setup and all of this. Has to. And people are giving him heat. There's a Washington Post piece here. The Hillary Clinton email story is out of control. And they're claiming that she's had to clear additional hurdles, and the scrutiny's even higher, and the burden on her has been even more intense. These people are out of their friggin' minds. Burden is... Who else gets to... The guy... People are saying, well, the destruction of evidence. Yeah, there could have been a destruction of evidence charge, but there can't be if you give immunity to the person who destroyed the evidence. But they gave immunity to... Usually you give immunity to someone, and they gave immunity to the guy who erased did the bleach bit and erased the stuff on the servers. Usually you give immunity to get somebody else. In this case, they just gave immunity. They didn't get anybody else. You could say, oh, well, Buck, they just needed the full story before they could know whether to bring charges. Any prosecutor will tell you they generally have a target of the investigation in mind, and immunity is a means of getting at that target. Hillary was never a target of the investigation in any meaningful sense. Do you trust the FBI now? Do you think that James Comey can be trusted to make non-politicized decisions? I don't. And Andy was here, and he likes Comey and says he's a career, public servant and everything else. And even he was like, look, I can't explain to you how this makes sense, because it just doesn't. It's not right what's going on. And the meeting with Loretta Lynch, with Bill Clinton, right before they announced charges, the fact that Comey has come out, or came out rather, before Lynch, that's the investigatory arm of the DOJ. It's the actual DOJ, it's the Attorney General in this case, that would sign off on charges. We don't need to hear from, but Comey is, you see, he's above reproach, so he takes the heat, and then Loretta Lynch just gets to sort of finish it off with, no charges. If it was Loretta Lynch, it'd be too obvious. I mean, Loretta Lynch saying no charges is basically the equivalent of Barack Obama saying no charges in terms of role and importance in the Democratic Party and the politicization of all this. Right? There's not much difference or separation that you could see there from a political point of view. But with Comey, it's supposed to be, okay, well, he's not the kind of guy who would do that. Yeah, he is. And he did. And that was unusual. That was an unusual step. Just like holding the stuff until right before Labor Day was an unusual. You think these are coincidences? I think that the FBI director, I think other people in the FBI also know that their careers will be in Siberia, so to speak, if they don't play ball with the Clintons, and they're very convinced that she's going to win, which would be very interesting if she doesn't, by the way. There's going to be a lot of... I'll make you a prediction right now. If Hillary Clinton does not win, there are going to be a lot of, missing emails from senior government officials, missing hard drives, maybe even a little bleach bit. We're going to get these little stories coming right around March of next year, I'd say. And they'll be, this... yeah, the communications between these different arms of the government, we can't find. We did a FOIA. We can't find it. Isn't that so weird? FBI communicating with DOJ about this. Yeah, no, can't. Nothing. That's so strange. Isn't it so weird? Yeah. It must be a big coincidence. The bureaucracy has been weaponized against dissent, and the dissenters are conservatives. The dissenters are constitutionalists. It's you, it's me. And that's where this is. We don't get the benefit of the doubt. In fact, any of us that get too uppity, any of us that cause a problem, will get squashed. They'll find a way. And they make examples of people. They make examples of people to send a very clear message to others. I am fond of bringing this up only because I got a lot of heat, even from some members of the team in the early days of this. I've been talking about this Bob McDonnell case for the, whatever it is, the almost, for the 2 years this has been dragging on. I've been saying this is ridiculous. This is unacceptable. That what he did is gross, but gross does not equal criminal. If gross equals criminal, Amy Schumer should be in prison. Gross does not equal criminal. That what he did, if you apply that to the Clinton Foundation, it's 1/1000th of what the Clinton Foundation was up to. And federal prosecutors have dropped all charges. So you have a former Republican governor who was at one point on the short list to be Romney's VP, or was it McCain's VP? I forget. And it was talked about as possible presidential material himself, who was facing 11 years in federal prison. They wanted to send his wife to prison for it. She's not even a public official. Federal prosecutors are going to imprison his wife? She has no official duty. If she has no official duties or obligations, how can she be guilty of corruption? Let's throw her in there too. 12 months in prison is no picnic. That's a pretty long time. 30 days? Okay. Most of us could probably handle that. Wouldn't be fun. 12 months? Felony charge? That's rough. That's rough. They wanted to send him. By the way, I don't think she should have spent a day in jail. I don't think she did anything illegal. I don't think she did anything wrong. Supreme Court sent this back. They vacated the conviction. Supreme Court smacked down these federal prosecutors. Do you think they're embarrassed, by the way? Do you think the federal prosecutors that brought this case, do you think that the federal judge that waved this thing through, you think that at any level there's any sense of, wow, we abused our power. We violated the public trust. We broke our oath. No. It wasn't really about that. It's about let's get this Republican. It's clearly, entirely political. Add McDonnell to the list. I've told you this before. Look at the list. Prosecutors going after Republicans. Rick Perry, Chris Christie, Bob McDonnell, Senator Ted Stevens. Ruined his reputation. Hid exculpatory evidence in order to prosecute him. Federal prosecutors. These people should lose their licenses to practice law for this kind of stuff. Some of them should go to prison themselves for this kind of stuff. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And somebody of Comey's stature knows that he's going to get well taken care of for really selling out the FBI. That's what he's done. The FBI has been maligned as an institution now, or it's maligned itself. I mean, the FBI has been greatly damaged. Any high-profile case that involves anyone of public stature that comes before the Department of Justice right now falls under a big cloud of suspicion to anyone who's paying attention, and that's just disgraceful. We'll go into a break. We'll be right back.
Buck Sexton, dispensing the truth.
On the Blaze Radio Network. The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
Let's take some calls. Matthew in Maine, you're on the Buck Sexton Show. Welcome.
Hey, Buck. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing okay. Just want to say that, I listen to you and Beck today, and I always find it I call.
I can't really wait. We can't really hear you, Matthew. Speak up a little bit. It's not clear. Go ahead.
Alrighty, is that any better?
Yeah, it's a lot better.
All right. I was just saying that I listen to you and Beck every day, and I always find it challenging this time of the day because I find myself going back and forth between a different program. So I just want to go ahead and congratulate you because you definitely got my year. 9/11, I was in the old guard of the Army, stationed at Fort McNair, D.C., also known as the Presidential Honor Guard, and we were at Fort Myer, Virginia on September 11th. When we had literally felt the ground shake. And we ran back to our base, drew arms, guarded the base, and about 72 hours later, the Federal First Search and Fire Rescue Team had cleared us to go into the Pentagon to do classified documents and recoveries. First off, I want to say there is a plane. I was there. I saw pieces, and I helped to retrieve pieces. So we can just throw that one out of there. And the aftermath for doing that for about 30 days, I had never seen or felt such patriotism in our country. And I just think that, not only this election, but, to come, that we need to be able to find that as a nation, find that patriotism. I struggled for about 14 years with PTSD before I started getting help. I'll never forget this moment, but it took me about 10 years also to just find forgiveness and find healing in that. And this Sunday is my first Sunday where I'm not going to be away from the public. I'm actually going to be going out to a memorial service, telling and sharing my story on a day that I normally just sleep off. And I just want to, thank everybody who came together during that difficult time. We lost a lot of brave people, a lot of noble people, and it's just a sad time for me.
Well, Matthew, I'm glad that you're doing better and that you found your own way to healing. I thank you very much for your service, and I appreciate you calling in and sharing your story. Shields high, Matt. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
It's interesting. My favorite place to get coffee in the West Village, which is my favorite part of New York City, is right next to a fire engine house, a fire department station, engine company, and they lost a whole bunch of people. They have the names up there on the plaque. So it's still, you walk around New York, and even in places you wouldn't necessarily expect, it's still around. It's still around. All right, team, we've got more coming. Stay with me.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show, only on the Blaze Radio Network.
We got Katherine Mangu-Ward on the line. She is Reason Magazine's editor-in-chief. Katherine, great to have you. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for having me back.
Trump versus Clinton versus everything good. We know a lot about Trump versus Clinton here. Why don't you tell us about everything good?
I wish that all my interviews started that way. So the thing about everything good is it's stuff that doesn't have to do with politics. And I think a lot of us feel that way in 2016, but it's sort of more robustly true than ever when you think about politics from a libertarian perspective or from someone who thinks that government isn't the solution to everything. So, for example, Republicans used to argue and grandstand about privatizing the post office, like in the 80s particularly. This was a big thing. Privatize the post office. Nobody talks about that anymore. Why? Not because we privatized the post office. It's because we have email. So this is my argument, is essentially let's do more of inventing our way out of bad government services, since ending them seems almost impossible, no matter who wins the election.
So it sounds like you're advocating for and this is my term, so you feel free to quibble, change, or completely deny, but the sort of Uberification of the economy, which I love Uber, by the way. It's changed my whole view of Los Angeles because I don't have to deal with driving. I can just, hop in somebody else's Honda Civic and let them take me where I need to go. We can hang out in the front seat, get to know cool people. It's fun. It's like hitchhiking, only safer. But doesn't government always find a way to ruin even the cool things that entrepreneurs and tech people and everything else create? I mean, we see now there's all this talk about what's going to happen with the internet. They're going to regulate it. What are they? They're trying to fight Uber in certain places. Isn't that always an additional layer of problem that gets thrown on this? I mean, you're talking happy stuff. I should probably just let you, but
no, it's a good point. So basically, the circumstance is that we have to be continually saving ourselves from the terribleness of government. We don't sort of get saved and stay saved. So yes, it's absolutely true that for every place where we innovate our way out of bad government services, we wind up back in a morass because legislators or governors look at something and they say, "Oh, that looks new. I better put some more rules on it." And of course, sometimes the entrepreneurs themselves participate in this. There are plenty of people who I would put in the category of totally world-changing and heroic inventors and entrepreneurs who have also turned around quite quickly and become rent seekers, people who are just looking for advantage from the government, including Uber itself, which has collaborated in New York in particular with regulators to keep their competitors out, sort of close the door behind them. And some would say Elon Musk of SpaceX, who is now one of the, he obviously provides services to NASA. He takes government subsidies for some of his other companies. I think that's sort of inevitable, and it's just part of existing in the world. But yes, it's totally true that you can fix a problem only to have it, rear its ugly head again in the form of some guy with a great new idea for a new regulation.
How do you think it is that people who are, particularly people who live in on the coasts and have advanced degrees, seem to sneer at the notion that government is anything other than this wonderful angel that comes down and gives you health care and gives you Social Security, and this sort of I feel whenever Chris Hayes is on MSNBC, and I don't watch MSNBC much, but I'll see that guy. He seems like an earnest dude. I don't even know if you're friends or not, but he seems like an earnest guy. I feel like I'd like to sit down with him and be like, government sucks, right? Like we actually both know that, right? Like I know that you want to talk about people love Social Security and people love this, but everyone's real experience with dealing with the government involves, as you said, the Postal Service, the IRS. You look at your connectivity with government and the programs that it runs, and they're abysmal. Anyone who's ever spent any time in a municipal government building, by the way, it is super depressing, as I can attest to. Why are all these people walking around acting like they think government's so great? Is really that's the question that I'm trying to pose to you.
So I think confirmation bias is a powerful psychological phenomenon, right? This is where it's hard for us to absorb facts that go against the thesis that we already hold, and very, very easy for us to absorb and, in fact, exaggerate the importance of facts that show that our enemies are wrong and bad. So I think if you ask people the question in the right way, everyone will acknowledge that government is bad when it comes to a certain set of issues, right? So, when you talk to, and this is just, you can sort of, I think a broader critique of the liberal conservative dynamic is, okay, so government is totally bad, say liberals, when it's telling you who you can have sex with, but it's totally good when it's telling you what size of soda you're allowed to buy. And then conservatives would say, oh, government is terrible when it's telling you that you can't buy a gun, but it's totally good when we go to spread democracy across the world via our armed forces, right? And I think, to me, this is the place where libertarianism has an answer, which is to just say, maybe it's actually bad at everything. Maybe if we can't even agree on what it should be doing, let's try less. Let's try letting people decide for themselves. And I think it's the same thing here. Everybody sort of can grump about the DMV, but you either see it through the lens of all government bureaucracies are bad and essentially corrupt, or you say, oh, it's a necessary evil, but without the DMV, probably vehicular manslaughter would, quintuple.
Where do you see libertarianism winning on issues on a political level, right? You mentioned sort of private sector. There's sort of, the private sector and libertarianism, there's plenty of crossover there, right? People, entrepreneurs doing cool things without government in the way, great. On issues, though, that we would view as more directly in the realm of politics, where do you think the tide is heading in the direction of libertarianism, regardless of who the next president will be?
So there are a couple of bright spots. I mean, I think when we talk about the classic libertarian issue, drug legalization, that's something that's really making a lot of headway. Some sort of totally accomplished victories about gay marriage and other areas like that. At the same time, I see no reason to think that we'll scale back any of our foreign adventurism. I see no reason to think that we'll scale back any of the massive entitlements, many of which obtain mostly for the middle class or the elderly, who, as a group, have more resources than the young these days. I think I'm a cheerful person. I would like to say, let me just give you
are a cheerful person.
Places that liberty is winning. But I think the better list is the places where the policy debate remains mired in sort of tiny back and forth, just a small gain and a small loss, but it doesn't matter anymore. And that's kind of the point of this this piece that we're talking about. My editor's note in the current issue is to say, rather than say, let's have a bunch of congressional hearings about NASA's priorities, instead, isn't it cool that the Jeff Bezos of Amazon has like tens of thousands of acres somewhere in Texas where he's just secretly building super cool rockets? That's probably the way we're actually going to get out of the morass.
Huh. Yeah, very interesting. All right, Katherine Mangu-Ward, what's your latest on Reason, or where can we direct people to read the latest of the Katherine Mangu-Ward files?
People can come on over to Reason.com. I would actually, I'll use this little advertising spot to plug something by one of my colleagues. We just released about an hour ago a huge multi-part feature by my colleague Elizabeth Nolan Brown about this supposedly sort of big bust in Seattle of a sex trafficking ring, which her piece is just incredibly detailed, incredibly fascinating. And she lays out how this supposed, sinister cabal of sex traffickers was nothing of the kind, and that it was actually something much more like run-of-the-mill people buying and selling sex voluntarily. Given that sex trafficking is so much in the headlines, and that it's sort of this, people are referring to it as modern slavery, including the president, I think it's important to look a little closer at that narrative, and Liz's piece really does that. So come check it out at Reason.com.
All right. Katherine, always great to have you. Thanks for making some time on Friday.
Thank you.
We got Joe in Wisconsin before we go into a break. What's up, Joe?
Not too much, Buck. Shield tie. How are you
Shield
today?
tie. What up, buddy?
Calling to mention a postscript on the movie The Lives of Others, which you had talked about a couple weeks ago. The German pronunciation would be Die Leben des Anders. And for your listeners, it was about a Stasi officer who was monitoring a playwright and his girlfriend. And then when he saw how the Stasi were treating the playwright, he became disillusioned with socialism and turned on them. And the postscript is that, or turned on the Stasi, should say. The postscript on that is that the actor died not long after the film was made, and they were remodeling his apartment. And when they were remodeling his apartment, they found that it had been completely wired with a full deck of surveillance from the Stasi himself. So a little bit of life imitating art there. And his name in the movie was Hauptmann Gerhard Weisel, but I don't remember what the actor's name was. But it is a great movie.
Ulrich Mucha.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Yeah, that's Mura. The umlaut is tough to say. So I just one other thing I'd like to say, if I do have a few seconds here.
Yeah, man. Go for it. It's Friday.
I'm in Madison this weekend, and it's my 50th birthday on Sunday, which is September 11th, and I'm here to do an Ironman triathlon. And so I'm on, I kind of have unofficial membership in a lot of teams, and one of the teams that's going to be driving me forward on Sunday is going to be Team Buck. And so I want to appreciate all the, good commentary that you and common sense and honesty that you present to your listeners. It means a lot to all of us, I think, in an age of hyperbole and people who just obviously don't know what they're talking about. So very thankful to have you to listen to, and even though we've never met, I consider you to be among my friends.
I feel the same way, Joe, and I really appreciate the kind words. And by the way, if you haven't already, you should always stop in. There's this Facebook group. I don't run it or anything, but I know it exists, Team Buck's Freedom Hut, so you can always connect with people in your area and such that way. I think it has like 1,400 or 1,500 members, and they all just post stuff and talk and hang out. I don't run it. I don't admin it. It just is there, but occasionally I'll pop in and say hi. But, Joe, good luck in your triathlon, and thank you very much for calling in and talking about Das Leben der Anderen, The Lives of Others. Love that movie. Top 10, I think I got to put in my top 10 all time. That's how much I like the movie, because it is such an incredibly profound attack on statism and the surveillance state and tyranny. It's all in German, but that's, that adds a certain layer to it. That's good. It's a great movie. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I would really recommend it. All right. We will go into a break. We'll be right back.
Buck Sexton.
The Blaze Radio Network.
The Buck Sexton Show.
I gave you guys a book recommendation. I think it was earlier in the week for Mark Bowden's Killing Pablo, which is a great, great, great book. Second only to Black Hawk Down in all the things that I've read by Bowden. But I mean, it's a pretty quick and easy read too. My little brother sent me something pretty cool, interesting. I didn't know this, Pablo, because I'm about to start watching season 2 of what's the show called again? Narcos. Well, season 1 was great, and Pablo Escobar, who was at one point really the richest and most powerful man in the world in a sense. I mean, it was all a criminal enterprise, but he had so much. I think I read somewhere that he was losing $100 million a year in cash to spoilage or something like that. Because rats were eating the cash, like literally eating the bills, because they had to store them because they couldn't keep it in banks, so they were just burying the cash and wherever they could. Anyway, he had 4 hippos, and there's a National Geographic story that's been shared on Facebook about how those 4 hippos were allowed to stay on one of Escobar's estates in this like lake where they were living, and now there are 40 hippos. And the hippos actually maraud around and cause problems because Colombia is close enough in climate and such to their native Africa that these hippos are breeding, and they've got a hippo problem now in Colombia because of Escobar's little personal zoo. Hippopotamus, by the way, is Greek for river horse. And hippos are very dangerous, as seen in the otherwise absolutely terrible movie Congo, based on the decent Michael Crichton book Congo. Hippos are, people say that they kill more people in Africa than any other land animal. I think that's true, right? Yeah. We grow up with these games like Hungry Hungry Hippo, and we think, oh, they're just like these cute big cows. They have giant razor sharp teeth. They're very, very territorial. They're very aggressive. They're pretty fast on land, and they'll attack in water. They're crazy, yo. You don't want to mess with a hippo. That's what I'm trying to say here. It's like this is a public safety announcement that I'm making. But you can also see hippos now in Colombia, just as in some parts of Florida you can see enormous boa constrictors that are not native there but have been let out in the wild and are doing quite well. So that's my little hippo interlude. Remember, hippopotamus, Greek for river horse. That's a fun thing to whip out at as a story at a cocktail party. All right, hour 3 coming up. we might have another one of our libertarian buddies joining here, which means we'll probably talk Gary Johnson, the media, and whatever else comes to mind. It's freestyle time, team. Back in a few.
You're listening to Buck Sexton on the Blaze Radio Network. Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
All right, team, welcome to Hour 3. We're joined by the one, the only, the irreplaceable, the indefatigable Matt Welch, editor-at-large for Reason Magazine. A lot of libertarians today. We had Katherine on before. Now we got Matt Welch. You guys are just taking over with your libertine ways.
Yeah. We're all just stoned here, Buck. You can tell by giggling.
So Matt, you know it's coming. We got a question for you. Hit it.
And what is Aleppo? And what is Aleppo?
Matt, you're just going to have to take me through this one a little bit.
He ganked it. His net was empty, and he scored the goal for the other team. That's what that was all about. What do you want me to say? The guy screwed up. The one silver lining on this, I compare this a little bit to Donald Trump's interview with Hugh Hewitt a year ago, if we all recall. When
are you going to go curds on me right now?
Yeah, he.
Oh, come on!
No. I just listen. There's a Trump tried to bluff his way through. Is the conclusion I want to bring out on this. Not that Trump is a bad guy because of the way he answered that, or that his ignorance is disqualifying, or anything like that. I have my issues with Trump. I'm saying that in that moment, there is something to be said about the honesty of ignorance and fessing it up. I think that everybody in public life, including yappers like us, could stand to use a little bit more humility and occasionally admit when they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Sadly, you should know what the hell you're talking about when you're running to be the president of the United States. So it's not there's no lipstick to put on the pig. But I think, compared to describing Libya as smart power at its best, which Hillary Clinton has done, I think this sin ranks rather lower on that list.
Yeah, look, I think that's people are going to make a bigger deal out of this than they should. But in terms of what it does symbolize with regard to Gary Johnson's seriousness or lack thereof as a presidential candidate, I feel like it's not possible to have read a major newspaper on just the front page in the last 3 months and not know what Aleppo is. So that's why I think this for me is akin to Sarah Palin when asked, what do you read? Where do you get your news sources? You're not allowed to blank out on that. You have to just say a newspaper. There's no, all of them or what do you mean or what? You just say a few newspapers.
I would answer that question. I had Twitter. Someone asked me this the other day. I was doing a Reddit to ask me anything. They're like, so what's your favorite liberal publication? What's your favorite conservative one? And I was like, you know what? I don't read anymore. I just use Twitter. I follow people and I follow them to where they're going and talking about. I know you're right. Of course, you're especially when you're running for president, not just president. You need to know stuff like that, and you need to not have brain.
And it wasn't like it also. I mean, not to pile on with Gary here, and not to make jokes about how he's clearly had lots of papers in his hands. They just had nothing to do with the news. But, with Gary here, it's not like the question was, what is EBITDA, which you would hope that a presidential candidate who's going to be maybe, very important to the economy would have some idea of what that is. But that's a little, people don't know what EBITDA is. And, okay, fine.
I don't know what EBITDA is. My God. Is that what I'm supposed to shout when I'm shooting up my local?
No, but that's what I mean. This wasn't some little sort of bit of trivia, right? I mean, Aleppo is the scene of a massive siege and slaughter, and I mean, there's terrible things going on there, right? It's not even just that it's something he should have known; it's that anybody would not know who wants to be president. Anyway, I think it's as was it Was it Carter who said there was no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe? Or am I getting the quote?
Ford.
Oh my God, Ford.
While
Sorry.
he was president, said that there was no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, which was a very curious thing for my Eastern European friends in Poland and Czechoslovakia to learn for sure. No, I wrote a post today being skeptical, not of the criticism of it necessarily, but of the impact that it would have. And part of it goes back to that Trump thing. I don't think, and it goes back to, even though I didn't mention it, George W. Bush talking about Slovakians and Grecians back in 1999 or 2000 or whatever it is. I am not convinced that there's a lot of evidence that Americans give a rip about those moments in terms of looking negatively at those candidates. Certainly both the other guys were pretty successful. And yeah, Sarah Palin had her moment about Russia, although some of that was kind of amplified or exaggerated, if I have the story correctly, like by Tina Fey. But I don't think that Americans place the voting public places as much value in those moments. I think part of it is kind of an in-group signaling exercise of people who are part of the media elites. And let's just count me and you in that, even though that's not necessarily true. But, I mean, people who are every day wake up and are talking about, writing about, commenting on, or shaping American affairs. It's those people who are not particularly popular in this election. I don't know if you've noticed. They're the ones who get the most excited about these types of moments, I think, more than the average guy in the street. So I'm not convinced that this is going to impact Gary Johnson at all. Part of that is out of hope, because I am rooting for him to do better than he's doing, although he's doing better than any third-party candidate since Ross Perot in 92. But part of it also is just observation. How many weird things has Donald Trump said about foreign policy over the last 14 months, and yet here we are.
I do think that part of this cycle has turned into a both sides playing this. It's almost like a pie eating contest, but it's a lie eating contest, meaning that we're you have, I should use that again, by the way, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
You have people on the left who like to point out Trump. I mean, I was on CNN last night, and all they wanted to talk to me about was Trump's claim about Iraq, how he was against it. And I just find this to be kind of he was a private citizen. He could claim that he told a golfing buddy at some point that he was against it. I mean, you really can't, he's on record saying it was good. He's on record saying it was bad, and they did this whole day. But who really cares? And I think that people think that I'm being some sort of a Trump partisan. I actually think it is kind of a who really cares, because, again, to the point about what matters, like Hillary voted for the war. She was in a position of public trust. Trump was some guy who was, selling steaks and building golf courses. So it doesn't really matter. But they get all upset about this. And then on the left, they don't say anything about Hillary pulling this whole, classification has to be marked at the top and the bottom. That's just a lie. That's just not true. What Hillary Clinton said to Matt Lauer during that debate is a bald-faced, out-and-out, provable, no discussion about it lie. And yet only on the Trump side of the equation we're being told that Matt Lauer fell down on the job and, was horrible.
I went on MSNBC last weekend.
You did?
I go there all the time.
You go over there?
I go where I'm at.
Do they put soap bars in pillowcases and try to attack you in the hallway?
A lot of people, there's, first of all, the people who are not on camera, there's a lot of closet libertarians in that room, I will tell you that. Oh. And I'm talking about people that you would be surprised. The shows that they are producers on are like serious libertarians, and were always like whispering to me about Rand Paul and stuff like that. It's very funny. But no, they like to have me on either to, outflank them on stuff like civil liberties, or to be the person who tries to explain what the crazy non-progressive world believes. At any rate, the setup by Joy Reid, who I consider a friend, I was on with Joan Walsh and a couple other people, but the premise of it...
Joan Walsh? Good heavens, sir. Good heavens. Go ahead.
The premise of the whole segment, and you can look at find this on YouTube, it's pretty remarkable, was... There's absolutely nothing in the email scandal. It's a made-up thing by media who is rooting for Trump and engaging in false equivalence. and she did nothing wrong. And they all went around, and that was the setup, and everyone agreed with the setup, and then they finally got to me. And I was like, dude, she lied a lot about this. And they jumped down my throat like, oh, we can't use that word. She didn't know it at the time. We don't know. We can't speak as to motivations. We have to be very careful. This is the right-wing media talking points. Dude, she lied. And she continues lying about it. She lied when she said that James Comey cleared her, gave her the seal of approval that she did not lie. That was a lie, too. She lies almost every time she opens her mouth about this, but there's this kind of bubble of reality, of irreality that we deal with. And
I was told last night, I was chided last night on TV by Don Levin because he says, well, Trump lies more. And I'm like, well, I mean, can I see can we do like a count if we're just going to make that claim? Because Hillary lies a lot. She lies.
She does, and she lies about things that have to do with her own performance as a government official. And that's kind of important. There's a difference, as you alluded to earlier, between how you jackassed on Howard Stern in 2003 or 2 talking about the war. Now, I think probably, and I would say certainly, let's say, just based on the guy who I don't think is particularly honest, Trump has kind of mischaracterized or even lied about all of that. But as you point out, he didn't vote for it. Hillary Clinton not only did she defend her vote over time for the Iraq War, she only began to say that there was any possible learnable lesson about why that vote was a mistake about a year and a half ago, about 2 years ago. And again, as I mentioned before, she still describes Libya as smart power at its best. She's not learning through her bad mistakes. That is
her CPU is not a learning computer.
It's not a learning computer, and it is remarkable and worth a constant reminding that the same kind of progressive left who at the end of the Bush administration was damn near hysterical about executive power, about interventionism, about civil liberties, is now nominating and rallying around someone who is arguably the single most hawkish Democrat, someone who would like to see Edward Snowden locked up, who always is on the side of the government getting in your beeswax when it comes to national security, and who's being supported by a who's who of neoconservatives now. So it's just we live in remarkable times.
Aren't you unnerved or agitated or both by the FBI seeming to at least, I mean, to me, I mean, look, Andy McCarthy I assume you know Andy, former senior federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, really knows this stuff very well. Better than 90%, 95% of the legal analysts that I see going on TV on a regular basis. And he likes Comey on a personal level. And he's like, look, I don't know what to tell you. Like, some of the stuff that the FBI has been pulling is just, I can't prove it. I can't, there's no evidence, but it looks really bad. I feel like the Department of Justice looking like it is in the tank for one presidential candidate and, in a sense, interfering in a partisan way in a presidential election is deeply damaging. I mean, we already had people that were upset about governance and everything else going into all this. I think now they can point to this and be like, yeah, this really is fixed. It really is rigged.
Yeah, you knew that going in. I've heard people who I respect, who are not Hillary Clinton fans or Democrats, but who've been involved in prosecutions, say that they agree with his kind of preponderance and also intent standard. That, yeah, you could get her on the technical details of it. Sure, she clearly violated the law. I think even Comey, he might have not put it in those words, but he spelled it out in his press conference about there. But that federal cases usually are not made with this much evidence because there's not as much clear intent. I think, that's it. Maybe it's debatable within the levels of debate, but sadly, we all knew this going in. It's equivalent to ending the NBA Finals on a foul call. It's just not going to happen, right? And is especially not going to happen, I think, with Hillary Clinton and a Democrat, although I think it probably also would not happen with a Republican in general for the same referee reasons. And you're right, it just leads to this widespread and deserved cynicism out there about the equal application of the laws. That's why the moment that was so powerful at the Lauer thing is from the service person saying, hey, look, I'd get punished for that. you're above the laws that affect me. How do you answer? And she doesn't have a good answer for that. And the Washington power structure does not have a good answer for that, and it feeds into the reason why people are just sick of government right now.
I would be much more forgiving of the whole thing, and I know it's easy to say that, but I really would if I felt like it was establishing a sort of new standard, essentially the standard being, look, like if you didn't mean to do something bad, if you weren't intending to be reckless with government secrets or whatever, we'll give you a pass. That's not the case. And nobody who works in government thinks that's the case. This is a Hillary Clinton specific standard, which I think is what makes it so much. So we don't even get the benefit of, okay, well, now this is sort of like an affirmative defense that you can make. It's just, well, if you're not Hillary Clinton, you're screwed. So it's, stinks to be you. Matt, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was going to ask you. So you roll over to MSNBC and they don't try to give you a code red. That's good news. Who's good people over there that I would probably think is a communist? I'm not going to ask you to say anything bad about anybody, but like who's like a good dude or good dudette that I would call, or I would assume I should say is a commie?
Chris Hayes.
I just said that before you came on to Katherine. He seems like he'd be a good dude.
He's a good dude. He is genuinely interested in other sort of belief systems or interpretations that are different than his own, and he does it through a level of honest exploration, I find. I think, and I like him as a guy. He's a nice guy.
Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, my instincts once again correct. This just falls into the broadly based theory of Buck is almost always right, Matt. That's what we call it over here at the team. The Buck is almost always right.
And then I would probably shock you if I mentioned the name of one of my favorites, who's no longer there, Melissa Harris Perry. We saw each other and very warmly embraced the Democratic National Convention.
What?
Part of it is that they really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that show. It actually reminded me of your old show a little bit. I know that sounds.
Oh yeah, Real News. Yeah, I know, mate. Rest in peace.
Real News. I mean, because you sat around the table with the same people more or less for an hour or 2 hours, and you kind of chewed on a bunch of different things, and you can have longer conversations. And they weren't afraid to talk about all kinds of weird pop culture stuff and race stuff in a different way. And they just always love to get me on, as oftentimes I'd be the only white person or the only white male, or usually all of the above, and they would get me talking about like black women's hair. They love to try to make me as maximally uncomfortable, and I would roll with it because I love television, Buck.
Nice. Good man. Matt Welch is the editor-at-large for Reason Magazine. Follow him on Twitter. He's a highly entertaining and sophisticated and interesting fellow. Mr. Welch, always a pleasure, sir. Great to have you. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Team, we've got more. We'll be right back.
And what is Aleppo?
This is the Buck Sexton Show.
The Blaze Radio Network.
This is the Buck Sexton Show.
All right, let's take a call from Charles in North Carolina. What up, Charles?
It's going good.
Good, man. Sounds like you're on the road.
Yeah. On my way into work.
Good man. What's up?
Voter ID laws.
Yes, sir.
What is going on with specifically in North Carolina?
Are you asking me or are you telling me? I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm asking you. Sorry.
You're asking me what's going on with voter ID laws in North Carolina? I'd have to look. I don't know. Is there? I mean, I know there have been big fights over it in the past, and because Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was struck down by the Supreme Court, there was some changes in policy in states like North Carolina where voter ID, I believe, was deemed acceptable, and in fact, right at the election that happened right after that, minority voting went up after voter ID went into place. So unless disparate impact now means more minority voting and we're supposed to think that's a bad thing, hard to make a case that voter ID in North Carolina is discriminatory and therefore a violation of the Civil Rights Act. But Charles, that's just going from a buck brain. I haven't looked up any of this stuff in a little while.
Okay.
That was pretty good, though.
I had heard that Governor McCrory had asked for some emergency deal with the Supreme Court. I haven't been able to find out any more information about it, though.
Well, Charles, you know what I will do for you? Because you're raising a very relevant and important issue, I will look into it, and when I know more, I'll hit it on the air. And when you're listening live or download the podcast, you will get a more in-depth and solid answer from me. How about that?
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right, sir. Have a good day at work. Pay attention to the road. Be safe. Talk to you soon. 888-900-3393 if you want to call in on those phone lines, please. And, wow, it's almost like Friday party time. Almost time to bust out the I don't know. You know what I like these days, actually? Margaritas with no sugar. It's kind of an exciting way to do it. More coming. Stay with me.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show.
Team, earlier in the week, I talked to you about this thwarted terrorist attack near Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, which one of the more beautiful sights you can go and see in any city anywhere in the world. 3 women have been arrested in connection to it. This is sort of a follow-up to what we talked about earlier in the week. Radicalized and fanaticized women. They were, we know they were jihadists. They were Muslims. We know they lived in a suburb of Paris. There's also 2 men who have been arrested along with them. And France is still saying that they are facing an unprecedented threat from people who have been recruited or indoctrinated by the terrorists in Iraq and Syria. So this is still unfolding right now. Keep in mind, Paris has been hit with a couple of really big mass casualty attacks. So this would have been another one. The car was found Sunday morning. No one was inside. 5 canisters filled with gas in the trunk. Empty canister, one of the seats. Jerry cans of diesel, papers with Arabic writing. So, they were trying to create a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. So you had the Nice attack, which killed 86 people. You had, 130 killed in the attack that included the Bataclan theater massacre. And you also had the Charlie Hebdo mass shooting. And you've had a number of other smaller attacks. You have the priest who was beheaded. You had another police officer who was beheaded, I believe, on Facebook Live. This is what's going on in France. And the administration, I know, is trying to take a lot of credit right now for successes on the ground and taking back territory from the Islamic State. Unfortunately, this jihadist enterprise of ISIS is going to continue to haunt all of us for quite a long time. When you think about what happened with al-Qaeda in Afghanistan after they lost, and remember, originally al-Qaeda was based out of Sudan. I mean, that was where bin Laden had sought shelter, and the sort of crazy dictator in charge in Khartoum. They were allowed to, bin Laden was allowed to, sorry guys, it's so, I try not to lose my train of thought, but apparently I am on like a main routeway here in New York City where sometimes the ambulance just sits right under my window and there's nothing I can do. I mean, unless I was even if I were in the Freedom Hut were a professional radio studio, it's so loud outside right now that some of that noise would come through. But at least it's live radio, and I am here in New York City, so there's that. And sometimes I can hear the protests outside my window as well. For these days, it's Black Lives Matter. It used to be Occupy Wall Street. So I'm hoping that siren will dissipate in the next couple of minutes because of New York anyway, I don't need to tell you any more about that. So al-Qaeda was originally based or was based in Sudan. Bin Laden went through a period of exile there and then went to Afghanistan. And there was a short time where they were considering a move to Chechnya, actually.
So they move around, but even when they don't have an official base, and really Al-Qaeda moved from Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda Central just moved from Afghanistan into the border region of Pakistan, as we know, which is eventually where, well, we didn't find bin Laden in the border region, really. We found bin Laden well inside Pakistan, and we can all come to our own conclusions about whether or not some members of the Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI, maybe they knew where bin Laden was. I don't know, maybe. I'm just going to say it's a big maybe. Likely. Probably. But the point here being that Al-Qaeda, even when it lost territory, continued to be an ideology, continued to be a network and a group, and we can certainly expect the same thing is going to happen as ISIS loses territory and these attacks that are happening in Europe. And right now, you can assume, I think you could assume with certainty, that there are terrorist attacks that are in progress in terms of the plotting phase in Europe. And sometimes they'll take weeks, sometimes months for them to pull together the surveillance. They'll sort of really pick the target out. They'll look at a few different targets. When a jihadist is going to give his or her life in an attack, they tend to want to make sure that they make it a spectacular attack with as many casualties as possible. And so there will be some target selection process that they go through, and they'll also try to spend some time on site at the target and understand better how they can inflict maximum casualties and damage. That's going on right now. That is, as I said, that is a certainty. There's no way that there aren't cells that are active in Europe. All the European intelligence services are very worried about this. And this is now something that we also should be aware is likely happening in this country. I don't know if the networks are as established and entrenched. I do think it's interesting when the discussion always turns to how much better America is at integrating its Muslim minority than Europe. Well, when you look at Muslim populations in Europe, they are a larger percentage, a considerably larger percentage of some of these countries, right? In France, they think there are 6 million. Some say it's more like 10 million because there are a lot of illegals and people not counted in the census data out of maybe 60 million overall citizens. I mean, in America, you've only got about 3 million, maybe 4 million Muslims out of a population of 320 million. But we see that they, because of proximity to Syria, they've had many more connections, direct connections of terrorists who have gone to fight in Syria and then come back. And in some cases are being told, don't even come to Syria, just wage jihad on your own there. So you have a larger population, more attacks, and a generally more permissive environment, although that changes in some of these countries as they get hit hard by terrorist action one way or another, that they are more permissive of Islamist ideology and more permissive of hardline mosques. And, they've got a big problem on their hands, because this is not going away anytime soon. And keep in mind, every time there is a terrorist act that is either pulled off or even some of these attacks that are thwarted, there are other individuals who think they want to follow suit. There's a copycat effect with a lot of this, because for every radical that tries to build a VBIED or strap on a suicide vest, there are many other individuals in France, in Belgium, in Germany, in the UK, you name it, who have already radicalized. They're supportive of the Islamic State. They're supportive of these kinds of actions in the name of jihad, but maybe don't have the networks, logistics network necessary to conduct this kind of attack, or maybe they just haven't yet worked up the sort of final urge necessary to be a suicide attacker. But as attacks happen, it sort of can, pardon the expression, light the fuse. And there are many fuses that have been lit. We just don't know how long the delay will be across Europe. And I think also there's it's very interesting to think about whether, because Hillary Clinton says that Donald Trump would be the best thing that could happen for ISIS is that Donald Trump is elected. And yet there's a sense in this country that if there was a major terrorist attack, it would mean Donald Trump is elected. Right? If we got hit hard, I think Donald Trump would, from an electoral perspective, he would benefit from that. People would say, you know what, we really just can't trust these Democrats. They won't speak about this stuff honestly. They don't take it as seriously as they should.
or they don't view the threat as being as dangerous as they should. And so Trump would benefit. Meanwhile, you got Clinton trying to promote this idea that if Trump were to get elected, it would somehow be playing into ISIS's hands, right? You know, this is sort of an Obamaism. He likes to say things like this. So you're playing into the enemy's hands, playing into ISIS's hands. You're on the wrong side of history. Another thing Obama loves to say, which is completely meaningless and sort of a classic Obamaism. But anyway, so it looks like this attack on Notre Dame was thwarted. I will say, and I kind of shy away from sometimes making these sorts of statements because you just don't, even though I know I'm speaking now to a collection of incredibly decent people and patriots, you just don't want to even air this out, right? This is the sort of thing like, you know, it's like Voldemort. You don't even want to speak its name. I have been surprised there aren't more attacks on Christian churches and monasteries and other sites of importance to the Christian faith in Europe. I've always sort of wondered why that wasn't a higher priority target for the jihadists. Because when they go after each other, when hardline Shia go after hardline Sunni, they blow up mosques. You know, what was one of the goals of Zarqawi, or one of the main targets that he picked in order to try to achieve his goal of a civil war in Iraq? He blew up the Al-Askariya Mosque, the golden domed mosque of Samarra in 2006. So they will go after the religious shrines and sites of other Muslim sects and groups, and they certainly will do that to Christians. And historically, I mean, they've been destroying Christian churches in Iraq and Syria and elsewhere. But I mean, in the West, they tend to go for daily life targets, mass casualty attacks over attacking, say, a church on a Sunday. And now some of this might be that there are attacks that are thwarted, but I worry that could be. I mean, we see this now where an attack was thwarted on Notre Dame Cathedral. I worry that we might see more of that because we haven't, and it doesn't really, given what they're trying to achieve from their perspective, a major attack on a packed cathedral somewhere in Europe would really serve the purposes of the jihadists very well. So I worry about this. Is the kind of stuff that I think about. I worry about this, and I don't know if the European intel services are really up to the challenge of preventing this stuff from happening. I mean, they certainly haven't been able to prevent some major attacks over the last 12 months. Hopefully I'm wrong, and we'll beat them, and we won't have to worry about this. But we'll see. Back in a few.
Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network. Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
All right, team, I don't have much time to get to this, so I want to hit it fast. Excellent question from our caller before about North Carolina voter ID. I said I would look into it, and of course, I am a man of my word. Here I am. I've looked into it. Everything I said was true. Very important addition to the story. Yes, North Carolina in 2013 passed a law that required voters to show government-issued ID. It ended same-day registration, and it shortened the length of early voting from 17 to 10 days. And even though after this happened, there was an increase in black participation in North Carolina's vote in 2014. The Fourth Circuit, and this just happened last month, which is why I did not see this decision in NAACP versus McCrory, overturned the law. So they threw this out. They decided that going from 17 to 10 days is unconstitutional and racist. Same-day registration, which 36 states do not have, and is unconstitutional and racist. I believe early voting only started in 1988. Yeah, in 1988. A dozen states still don't have it. That's unconstitutional. I mean, the rhetoric from the left on this is just completely out of control. You've got, I'm trying to find this. We understand very clearly intentionality around voter suppression. I'm trying to find the exact quote. We understand exactly around voter suppression, and it feels like Jim Crow, said Corinne Mack, the president of the Charlotte Mecklenburg NAACP. I know people use the term new Jim Crow, but when we look at what's happening in this country, it feels as if there are some people who have still not got it. They have not got the revelation that we are all human beings. This is what someone at the NAACP is saying publicly to NPR about no same-day registration and limiting early voting to 10 days. You've got 10 days to get to the polls in North Carolina. Not enough. Has to be 17. Well, I want to tell those 17-day advocates that it should be 24, and anything less than 24 is racist. Oh, you want to come to me and say it should be 30 because 24 sounds racist to you? I can't win that argument. There are costs associated with all this. There's law enforcement presence. There are staffing costs. There are people that have to actually be there. There are issues of voter integrity that come up. Voter ID, the Supreme Court has weighed in on, and said it's fine. But there are still the Department of Justice, particularly in this administration, finds ways to use the Voting Rights Act to make sure that there's a pre-clearance hurdle. Anyway, it gets very complicated, but they still find ways to make it seem like voter ID is, as people are saying here, the resurrection of Jim Crow. Haven't got the idea, still human beings. So a law let's just review this. North Carolina passes a law in 2013. In 2014, voting is up among African Americans from before the previous election in North Carolina. So they passed this voting law. Voting goes up. And then the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals throws out this law saying that it is intentionally discriminating against black people. And now it looks like their counties are still going to be instituting some of their own changes, and it's turning into a big mess in North Carolina. This is just, the left doesn't care what the data is. They don't care what the intent of a law is. They want to keep the specter of huge racist conspiracy to prevent black people from voting in North Carolina, no matter what the law changes are. This is just, it's hyperbolic, it's ridiculous, and I'm glad that I want to thank that caller before for bringing this to my attention. I'll continue to look at this very closely.